Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the new standalone magnetic paddle modules from the guys at Fanatec, providing a very noticeable improvement in tactile feel over the spring shifters that come on a lot of their wheels. Time to put them through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. So let's take a closer look at the Fanatec Clubsport Magnetic Paddle Module, or MPM for short. The first thing that greets you when you open your box is going to be this set of paddles. Nice carbon fiber units, and of course they're snugly sitting in their little housing here, the foam that Fanatec has provided. Now, that's one thing you can't fault Fanatec for, is the presentation they usually have when you open a box and look at one of their products. They do a great job at that. Let's take these paddles out, get the foam out of the way. And we have a GT set, obviously the bigger ones, and we have a Formula set. But you can use these for GT too, if that's your preference. Doesn't really matter, does it? And we'll just use one of the GTs as an example here. I've already looked at all of them, and carbon weave is very nicely done. There's no defects in the carbon weave. Everything looks universal. So nicely done there. We have two holes over here that are countersunk, and those are going to be obviously for our flathead screws when we're mounting. It's a thicker unit than the advanced paddle module, and I'll talk more about that later on. This is a full, let me show you here, 3 mil thick paddle. Tighten my grip on it. There goes 2998. Okay, so that's a 3 mil thick paddle, which is the minimum in my book for a paddle shifter paddle. You know, the advanced podium modules have those 2 millimeter thick ones, and I always wondered about that because, yeah, it was always a concern, and I think I said that when I did the review, of the durability of something that thin. Plus, when we do the countersink bore there, that takes even more material and structural integrity out of the carbon fiber at a small area here. Even though the screw going in, the flathead screw, kind of helps clamp that down, but still, yeah, it's better to not do that, if obviously, because you're taking more material out. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later, but yeah, it feels very substantial in hand. Doesn't have any flex. I'm actually just kind of flexing the ends here. Very stiff. I like that. And we're going to, again, I'm going to compare some of this stuff to the APM gear when we get to that point. So nice paddles. Yeah, nothing to be complaining about here. All the edges are done nicely. Everything's rolled off, so there's no sharp edges anywhere. Again, good quality finish here. I like these. All right, let's talk about the shifter itself. Nicely done unit here. It's a usual finish from Fanatec. You can see it's an anodized, I believe that's anodized. It's a nice black finish on it here, and it feels good to the touch, so nice and smooth. And you can also see that it's quiet. It's a very quiet shifter, and we'll talk about that more later too, which is great if you need quiet shifters, but I prefer to make a little bit of a click. And again, we'll address that later on in the review. You can see the big magnets here. Again, everything's nicely done here. And we have the shifter lever itself, and that is a 4 millimeter thick piece, and it's 4 millimeter all around the housing here. And except for the flange, that's actually 6 millimeter. So they've reinforced the flange area. That's going to take most of the stress, which is a good idea. Well done as far as the engineering on that. We have a switch on this shifter, and I think you can see the little white plunger. See that white piece over here on the top? When we're pushing the shifter down, that's the plunger in the switch itself. We also have a socket head cap holding that switch on the housing there, but we also have another small one, it looks like. I don't know, maybe that's just part of the housing itself, but we'll take a closer look at that once we do the look inside. We have a cable coming out that's nice and shrink wrapped everywhere, all the way to the end. We have a Molex plug. Interesting thing here, we actually have 6 wires, but we only have a momentary switch here. I'm not sure why they're using 6 wires. It's still going to work, obviously, when we plug it into our... I'm going to be using this on a podium hub, and you can use this on the universal. You can use it in whatever wheels support it on their circuit board that you can plug in this 6-pin Molex plug. And we'll talk more about that when we're doing the installation. So what else can we talk about here? That's about it, really. I mean, it's the usual good-looking stuff from Fanatec. It feels great, feels very solid, has a little bit of heft to it. So yeah, I'm thinking for the price point, this is a pretty good kit. Right. Let's see what else we get. We get a couple Allen wrenches, a 4 mil and a 2 mil, and they do have ball ends on them. which is nice. I always prefer to have some ball ends on the other end of my Allen wrenches rather than just flat, because yeah, they can really save your hide when you're in a tight spot and you can't get the right angle on the head of your nut. We have 2 of these adapters, and these are used for the steering wheel diameter, whichever one you have. If you have a 280 millimeter diameter wheel, you won't need these, or you can still use them if you want, I suppose. And if you have anything over that, which I'll be using, I'm going to be using the Porsche wheel, but we'll talk more about that later. And yeah, this will actually extend the paddle out so that we can reach it with the larger diameter wheels. Really nicely done unit. We've got a couple of countersunk pieces there. It's aluminum. And these holes here, the 6 that remain, I don't know how well you're going to see that, but they're actually threaded for M3 threads. So when we assemble it, we'll see more of that. Speaking of the M3 threads, we get 2 lengths of screws here. We get a 5 mil and we get a 10 mil. And they're just the M3 screws, the usual color that we see from Fanatec. It's not quite black, it's kind of a grayish black, maybe even gunmetal. I like that finish actually, instead of just a regular black, but anyway. And yeah, those are the M2 hex heads that you're going to be using to tighten it down with. So a 5 mil and a 10 mil, and of course the 10 mil is for the spacers that we could be using here, depending on what you want to do. There are spacers, and the spacers themselves, I think they're like 5 mil. Yeah, these are 5 mil thick. So if you use a spacer, and we'll talk more about that when we're doing the mounting, then obviously we're going to need a longer screw to still get into the threads we're going for. All right, simple stuff. And we do have, last but not least, the socket head cap bolts that are M5s, and they will be going into our flanges, the 6 millimeter thick flanges, when we're mounting it to whatever wheel that we're mounting it to, or hub that we're mounting it to, for that matter. Right. So what else can we talk about here? I think that's about it as far as what's in the kit. We do get, obviously, the quick start guide, which has some decent information about mounting your brackets and things like that, what each bracket is for. Let's get the glare off of that. There we go. So yeah, pretty complete kit. Everything feels good, high quality. I really have no complaints so far, and I'm really pleased that these are 3 millimeter thick. Well, again, we'll talk more about that as we go along. I wanted to take this opportunity to do just a quick comparison type video showing the differences and similarities between the APM Advanced Paddle Module and, of course, the magnetic Clubsport paddle module. First off, let's talk about the modules themselves. As you can see here, if you look closely, you can see that this has a very nice finish on it, this advanced paddle module. It also has a 6-wire plug on it, or cable with a Molex plug on that. And yeah, so the finish is very much, if you look here, like this one, right? The MPM. So it looks like to me that we're getting some trickle down from the Podium series to the Clubsport series, which is a great thing to see. I really like it when a manufacturer does that. And even the flanges here on this, if you look, are the same width as they are on this Podium module. All right. So yeah, and of course everything else that's just like the Podium module, or the Advanced Podium module. Right. But let's take a look at the shifter paddles. Now this is where the differences are obvious. Now first off, this is the MPM, and that's 3 millimeters thick. This is the APM GT shifter, and it is 2 millimeters thick, right? So that might not sound like much, a millimeter, but in hand, right away, it feels a lot different to me. As far as this, I can actually feel like I can get a little bit of flex out of it, right? This one, forget about it. It's just rock solid. I mean, I could probably snap it, but I'm not getting any flex out of it. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, the first one is this one is thinner, right, from the APM. But not only that, they've cut out the little space in here to indicate a positive or upshift paddle. Now, when you remove material like this, doesn't matter if it's carbon fiber, aluminum, steel, whatever it may be, the area becomes less stiff, or weaker, if you will, not as strong. And I can actually take my thumbs, just like I was doing on that one, I can feel the weakness in this, but is it going to snap? Is it going to break? Who knows? Now, I've actually have picture proof that 2 of these I've seen. People actually email me all the time with stuff like this, showing that these had broken, and they've broken down here. in this part of the shifter, which is no big surprise to me, because first off, this tab here is extended down past the paddle pretty far compared to how far it's extended down on the GT paddle. So obviously we're going to have a bigger lever when we're pulling on this paddle to put pressure down here where these screws are affixed to the shifter itself. And over here, that pressure is going to be a lot less because we got a much shorter lever to pull against on this carbon fiber. So that in itself is going to make this a stronger paddle in that area. This one obviously is extended, and of course we've started with a 2mm paddle in thickness, and we've put the countersunk holes in there. You can see right there. And of course that takes the material away, even though this screw that is a flathead is going to go down there inside of that and kind of pinch down on that carbon fiber, giving it more strength, right? But we still taking the material away. So it can break. I've only seen 2 in the world that have actually broken. I'm sure most of them do not, and I can't even be certain on the conditions that those were broken. All I can say is when they sent me the emails showing me the pictures that, yeah, they just said, hey, yeah, I was just using it and the thing, snapped on me. At least it didn't break up here, right? This seems to be good. But I think most people when they're shifting are grabbing down in here somewhere. I don't usually shift from the tips or the bottom or the top. Right. So I just want to show you these similarities and differences. I mean, when you put this next to the 3mm, again, it doesn't sound like much, but when you put them next to each other and show that gap, let's get a good white background here. You can see what's going on. You can see it, at 1mm, to me anyway, makes a lot of difference. And this looks so much stronger than this one does in general, to me. Of course, that's just my observations. I'm sure there'll be others who disagree with those. Anything else I want to talk about here? Yeah, that's about it. Oh, I was thinking about actually using this GT shifter from the MPM on the APM, right? But here's the problem. First off, we've got a clutch down here. Now, I could take the paddle off if I didn't need the clutch, and don't worry about it, and just go ahead and put this in here. But I'm still got a problem with bumping up against this one. If I try to fix it there, it's not going to work. But remember, when you get your kit, you get one of these, right? These little extenders for larger steering wheels. So I could actually attach this here, like that, and then attach the GT paddle. And you can see I can actually get it in the second set of holes here from the outside, inbound, and still clear this shifter, or this switch, right? And I would be ahead of the clutch. Let me show you that right here. I'd actually be ahead of the clutch paddle. So I could probably leave the clutch paddle there as long as I don't use it and still use this shifter. Not even have to take it off. And still use this shifter back and forth. Yeah, it goes this way, see? So I'll be pulling this way towards me and sitting out here just enough to clear this one. Now, I did want to make a note here that this paddle here at 2mm thick does not bother me at all because it's so small, right? It's such a small area here that, of course, I'd still like to see it in 3mm, don't get me wrong. But I have a lot more confidence in this one lasting than one sitting, and this is another good example, of one where the stress point is right here and you've got such a long lever traveling towards the paddle itself. So yeah, I might even try that because I like the advanced paddle modules. I might even try running that paddle on there or something, It's always fun to experiment, right? If you can. All right, so that's it for the comparison of the advanced paddle module and the magnetic paddle module. And yeah, so we'll just get on to the next segment. So now let's take a closer look at this magnetic paddle module. And to take this apart, you have to remove this shaft or rod that the lever rotates on. And there are 2 little retainer clips in there. Spring clips, some people call them. Doesn't really matter. You just have to get one of these off to be able to slide that rod out and disassemble the lever or separate the lever from the actual housing here. And I was able to do that. It wasn't the easiest thing because these are very small clips. And that's what it looks like when you have it off. And I tried to use the usual tool like this. This is the kind of tool we normally use to take these off because they fit into the little pieces, little slot there on the top part. That's where you want this tool to get into so you can spread it and get it off. Problem is this is such a close tolerance or clearance in here that this tool didn't want to work right. I was able to rig something up though to make it work without mauling or marring rather, mauling and marring actually, everything up. And this is what the rod looks like. It is a stainless steel rod. I'm sure it's hardened, and you can see the other clip still on there because there's no need to take that one off if we're just going to slide it out one side. And if you'll look here, you can see that there is a groove right in here that actually captures the little clip. So that's how it works. And we also have a couple of bushings here that go into each side of our lever. They snap in like that, and then our rod would go through that, and of course through the housing too. So it's easy to take this on and off or apart, except for the clip part. So like I said, if you're not careful with these things, you can really bend them out of shape and you'll never get them bent back to where they'll work again. So you have to be very careful with this kind of thing, especially when they're so small. So let's take a look at the lever itself. Take bushings back out because they will fall out, I'm sure. And this is again a 4mm thick piece here. You can see the magnets embedded there. And of course that's the hole that everything, or rather not everything, but the bushings and the rods go into. And we also have a little rubber piece there. And if you look at this little pointer here, that's what is the silencer. That's what I call it, the silencer, or noise suppressor. And this piece of rubber goes all the way through this 4mm piece of bar here. And you can see one side's larger than the other. And I'm sure that facilitates how they, at the factory, put these puppies in here. They have a tool that goes through the center of this because it's hollow, right? So that's something that goes through the center of this that pushes this through, and then they can twist it or do something to it and then pull it back out. So that's why we have one side is smaller than the other. Now, as I said before in the closer look, I was thinking about doing something with this. I've always been thinking about it since I've got the advanced paddle module because they have that same rubber in there. You can see it right in there. I think you can see it. And it keeps things quiet when you're shifting. So it doesn't make a lot of noise. Now, I like the little noise in my shifter. So I'm going to see if I can remedy that. So what I'm going to do is take this out from pulling on the bottom side here, the big part, and kind of maybe put a little grease in there around it just to help things get slippery. And then I'll use some kind of a probe tool to push on it sideways like that, kind of deform it as I'm trying to push it down through and get the whole thing out. Because I don't want to cut it off. You could just cut the thing off and be done with it. But I'm not sure if I'm going to like it or not, number one. Number two, I always like to save all the original parts if possible, because I might want to put it back to stock OEM specifications, right? So always do that. All right. Now, the housing itself, this is where the switch is residing. I don't want to lose my little clip there. And you can see the plunger sitting up there. Now, there's another concern about taking this rubber off, and that is the over travel, or rather the rubber out of the lever, is there might be some over travel and we're pushing this plunger down too far and striking the housing. You can see a little bit of it there. There's the plunger, right? And as we're using the lever, it's pushing the plunger down. Easy enough to figure that out, right? Momentary switch. But we don't want to hit the housing with the lever. But the fortunate thing here is, after I examined it, is there is a ledge here that the switch housing is actually hiding under. So no matter what, if I take the rubber out, it doesn't matter because that lever is going to be flat against here, and of course it's straight. So it can't go past this ledge here because there's the housing of the let's see if I can get you guys to see this here. Go this way. All right. There's the ledge of the aluminum. That's part of the housing right across there. And underneath that's the top of the switch. Right? So that's what I'm talking about. If we're not going to go past and hit the housing itself, then we should be okay with this switch. From what I'm looking at from this side, I can actually look straight across here and see that when I push that switch down, the plunger down all the way, it's actually recessed. I don't know how well you guys can see that. Maybe I can do it from here. It's actually recessed a little bit underneath that ledge. Let's see if I can push it down. There we go. It may not look like it from that angle, but it is. So that will prevent over travel of the lever once I pull that rubber thing out of there, right? Okay. Also of note here is this is a momentary switch, and it's got 6 wires. Usually only see about 3 wires on a momentary switch, or maybe even 2. So yeah, I'm not sure whether there's 6 wires on this Molex plug, but I'm sure Fanatec knows better than me. And also the switch itself is attached with a socket cap head bolt there. And I thought this was another bolt or a guide, you know, that you put the switch on. The switch could have a hollow hole through it, and then we use that little piece there as a guide to put it on. But when you turn it around and look at it, you can see that there's actually a bolt in there. Little screw or bolt head. See that little hex head in there? So it's secured on this side and the other side. Right. I guess that's about it. Not a whole lot to this thing when you take it apart. And again, if you have the right tool to get that clip off, it's not hard to take apart at all, and it's very serviceable with the switch when it's exposed like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a good solid design. Everything's very solid, everything's stiff. And when I take things apart, I tend to look at things too and see how they are. In a nice stainless steel pin, rod, or shaft, whatever you want to call this. Yeah, everything looks really good here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to pull this rubber out, and then we'll do a little comparison, put it back together, and a little comparison on the sound between no rubber and rubber, because I'm leaving this one in here. And it's a test to determine whether or not I want to pull this guy apart and take the rubber off of it also and give me that crisp, clicky feel instead of this, which is soft. I'm going to call it mushy. It's not really mushy, but it's just soft. Which, again, you may need this if you want to be a quiet shifter in your house. So let's make this shifter louder. Now, out of the box, this shifter has a rubber piece in it that makes it very quiet. You can hear it clicking. And it gives a certain dampened feel to the shift itself. Not that that's bad. I mean, this is totally subjective, whether you would like that or not like that. Who knows? But it just doesn't sound like a magnetic shifter, to me anyway. But it feels like a very strong shifter, and it gives you a good feel, but not from the shift, you know, based on the shifters that I've used in the past and do use now. I'd rather have something clicky in there and give me a little bit more tactile feel in my shift, especially once we attach the paddle to it, you know. Yeah, even the paddle dampens it a bit. Anyway, again, this is purely subjective, but I just wanted to show you guys that this can be done. And the rubber is in the lever there. Get my little pointer here and show you that. You can see the rubber piece right in there. It's getting squished right now. All right, so if I pull it open, you can see a little better. Let's see if I can get my finger out of the way. All right. And of course, it's also on the other side, sticking out on the lever. And if you watch the look inside, you already know that. So we have the little piece right there. So, and if you watch the look inside, you know I was going to do this, or at least try to do this. So what I did was pull that rubber piece out, and that's what it looks like. Looks like a little barbell. Except one side is thicker than the other. And so I was able to take a couple of these nylon tools that I have for that you can buy in these little kits that you use for taking phones apart and things like that, and was able to put some grease on it. Again, I said I was going to put some grease. I used some of this 100% silicone grease here. And then I just kind of worked that little, the smaller piece on the other side, just worked it and kept shoving it, squeezing it and shoving it into the hole, and then boom, we went through. So awesome. And now we have the result. So again, here is the stock OEM rubberized shifter. And this is the without the rubberized shifter. Let me hold the pin in there because I don't have the clip on there yet. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it like this or not. Here we go. There we go. And this one at the same distance. Now this sounds like a proper magnetic shifter, doesn't it? Again, this is all subjective. Doesn't, you know, and then again, you might need to be quiet when you're doing shifting because you don't want to keep somebody up or whatever the case may be. But yeah, this, I don't have to worry about that. So this is, and not only that, but it has a different feel to it, as you might imagine. Yeah, that's it right there. I like that. And then with the paddle attached too on it, well, actually it won't quite sound like that. We'll do it once we have everything attached solidly to the wheel and everything, once we have it assembled. But yeah, still, it's got that crisp feel to it, as you might imagine, because now we've taken the damper or silencer away, right? So you can do this. And also, I was looking inside. You're not going to be able to see this because of the angle. Maybe you might be able to see a little bit there, but let me get the cord out of the way. But the white plunger is over. Get the cord out of the way. Gosh, yeah, there it is. You can see the white plunger over there, barely. All right, so I'm going to push the shaft down, or the lever down rather. And you can see, there you go. So I'm not hitting the housing on the switch itself. and the plunger is not being pushed so far that I can't travel anymore with it, because I put another piece in there after when I had it down like that, and I could actually push it down a little more. So I'm not worried about screwing the switch up. So that was the main concern here, was messing the switch up, not the noise, because I don't care about the noise. But yeah, that sounds, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds proper to me. And if I don't like it later on, or for whatever reasons I need to, I'm keeping this little guy, because I can slide it right back in just like I took it out. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so only thing left to do now is assemble these shifters to our podium hub. And of course, you can put it on the universal hub from what I've read from their site. The F1 wheels, the V2 F1 wheels, you can do it with those. And I'm not sure what else. I think that's all they're really listing right now. But yeah, I imagine moving forward, more wheels are going to be able to accept this. And it's all about the bolt pattern, right there. And having the little plug here that we're going to plug these into. But we'll get to that part once we do the assembly, which is next. So now let's go through the assembly of these shifters onto our podium hub. And I'm going to be using the Porsche wheel right here. And I'm going to also be using the endurance module. So that's going to determine where I want this paddle to land as far as reach. And in the manual, they show you a certain way to do it, but you can do it any way you want to. As far as the spacers, you can have, I'm going to show you this bracket here. Now this is going to be mounted right on this lever, right? And that's the only way to mount this. Magnet keeps grabbing it, but we're going to have it mounted there with 2 flathead screws. Then we're going to have this over here. Now here's where we have the choice. I can take this GT paddle, and I can just mount it flat on the top, flat on the bottom, right? Depending on what reach I need. And if I need more either way, then that's what the spacers in the kit are for, right there. So we could put like a spacer here, kind of hold it like flat like that. And you can see it's going to give me a 5mm push towards me, or towards the paddle. So you guys can see that right there. And we're going to use, and if you use that, that's where these 10mm long flathead screws come into their own. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and mount this bracket to the shifters. And that is, again, the smaller 5mm flathead screws. That is a 2mm hex on the top there. And remember, they give you a nice wrench for that with a ball end on it. I'm going to be using my Huddy wrench because it just makes things easier. And I'm just going to go ahead and affix these on here. And I'll probably speed this up so you guys don't have to. Here we go. The magnet's trying to grab it. So I knew this was going to be a little tricky with this magnet in here. So yeah, you got to kind of hold it. I'm going to do it this way because I'm right-handed. So you guys can see a little bit what I'm doing here. And just grab it. Push this in here first. So I'm trying to keep the magnet from grabbing at it and making the screw go towards the magnet again like it just did. And it's a little bit of a dance to get this going. All right, so there's one in. And of course, I'm not going to tighten it all the way up till I get the second one in. Like that. There we go. And now we have this one secured. But yeah, you got to kind of push down on it because, as you saw, the magnet will do its job and attract metal. So there we have it. My wrench roll away. Man, that is sounding good. And remember, I got the rubber out of the other one too, if you've been watching the video so far. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's the point. I really don't know where I want this shifter, but I'm thinking, because this endurance module and wheel are going to be sitting up here like this, and I put this up against here and kind of eyeball it, and I was kind of leaning down looking at it, where it's going to land at, and look straight down here. And yeah, I'm thinking that I'm going to want that paddle close to me. Yeah, as close as I can get it. So I'm going to put spacers in between it. So I'm just going to go ahead and of course the magnets are just playing havoc with this stuff. But I'm going to take one of the spacers. I'm going to take the longer screw this time. And I'm going to flip the GT paddle around so that the flathead countersunk holes are there. And I'm going to go ahead and put that through there. Preload the spacer. And because it's further away now than it was when I was trying to put the screws in on the shifter itself, I think I'm not going to have as much trouble, but maybe I spoke too early. Of course, it's going to be a little, again, it's when you have a couple of parts floating around like that, you just got to be mindful of what's going on. And again, I'll take the wrench. I like to take the wrench and preload it or put it on the screw first, and then kind of just grab things with my fingers and hope that I can get this thing to start without too much drama. Feels like it's going in. Yes. All right, so there's one. Now I've got to put another spacer in. There's a couple of ways to do this, but I'm just kind of winging it here on the video. So I've got one spacer in, obviously, and I've got to get the other one in. And I'm going to kind of try to slide it in there very gently, line it up, then go ahead and get my screw in to hold the spacer. Of course, everything's moving when I'm trying to do that. There it goes. So now it's in there between the spacer and the plate, and now I should be able to go ahead and start it, get it in there. You want to be careful when you start this stuff too. You don't want to cross thread anything. If it's not going in easy, stop, because you got a problem. It should go in really easy, I think. And I'm just going to snug this up. You don't have to torque the heck out of these things. Just give them a good snug like that. And I'm going to go back and check these again, just to make sure that I didn't leave those loose. All right, so that's my configuration based on the wheel that I'm going to be mounting this to. So we have our spacers in front of the extender or adapter, whatever you want to call it. And of course we have the paddle sitting on top now. And now when I put it up here and look at it, where it mounts to the holes right there. Yeah, that's the way I want it. And that's really as close as I can get this shifter to the rim of the wheel. So I'm pretty sure that's going to do it for me, and I'm not going to change anything. So I'm going to do is go ahead and get the other shifter configured the same way. Go ahead and get them mounted, which is no big deal. It's very simple. That's what they give you these M5 bolt socket head caps for. They simply just go into the flange and you attach it. Very easy. So when we come back, we'll have it attached and our wires still flaying around, and I'll show you where I'm plugging it in on this particular hub. Now I have both of the magnetic paddle modules attached, and it was a simple matter of attaching the bolts that come with your kit. These are two M5 socket head cap units, and it is a 4mm hex on the end. So get them tight, but don't try to torque the heck out of them, because you will strip one of these things. Remember, we've got a steel bolt going into an aluminum housing, so you have to be careful, but you do want to get them tight. Now, only thing left to do now is plug in. It's very easy to do. It's hard to get this wrong, at least on the podium hub, and I believe it's the same on the V2 Formula 1 wheels. But you've got a 6-pin plug here, right? See this Molex plug? That's 6 pins, 6 wires. And both of these plugs have 6 pins on them on each side. The plugs down here don't. So there's really no other place to put them except here, because there's nothing else on the circuit board. Now, these plugs are biased as far as twisting it one way or another when you plug it in. So you want to be careful about that and just pay attention. The easiest way I find to do that is, if you look at this Molex plug here, and I hope this is showing up well enough, you'll see that this row of pins in here are biased towards the bottom of that Molex plug. So in other words, you've got less space between them and this side of the plug than you do on the top of the plug. So that's what I'll be looking for when I actually look at the plug here, and you can see that's kind of the same deal. The pin, I hope this is showing up good enough. The row of holes there is closer to the top here than they are to the bottom. So that's how I want to plug this in. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to be flipping this around so that it matches the spacing on the row in there. Pretty simple, really. I mean, once you see that, then you know which way it's got to go in. And of course, we're just pushing it in. Done. Right? And I'm going to do the same thing, because obviously the plugs are going to be the same as far as where the rows are. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug this one in here. Like so. Be careful, you don't want to mess anything up here. Bend a pin, something like that. That would be not be good. All right, so see, I was actually trying to getting ready to put it in wrong. I thought it didn't look right, so that's why I pulled it back out. See, gotta be paying attention. All right, so there we go. Now that one's going in. So now we've got all this wire that we need to put away or tuck away or do something with. And when you're doing it inside one of the F1 wheels, there's a cap that you're taking off, and there's a lot of room inside of there, so it's not an issue. But here, I wanted this to go in and to where it's not going to get pinched. And remember, on this particular hub, we've got these little grooves in this cap, and this cap goes on top here, and we secure it with screws. that the wire's going to go through. That's what they're there for. So I'm going to kind of wrestle this in here, but I want to be mindful also. I don't want it, when this cap goes on there, I don't want it putting a lot of pressure on this wire, pushing on that circuit board, right? I just want to not do that if at all possible. So I'm going to kind of just loosely roll it around in here. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to get the job done, and that is not put pressure on anything. So I kind of like twist it so it rolls onto itself. And go ahead and put this one in too. And just kind of stick it around inside of here a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my cap and see where I am as far as the access holes and the screw holes in here. Everything's got to line up. A little more complicated on the hub, the podium hub rather, and maybe even the universal hub. I haven't put one on one of those yet. So that feels pretty good to me. It doesn't feel like it's putting a lot of pressure on any of the cables anywhere, and they're tucked in nice and neat, so they're not going to be hanging out in my way. So I'm going to put these screws back in to our hub, and I took these screws out as I was removing everything from the hub, and now I got to put them back in. And these are plastic pieces in here that we're screwing these into, so these are like these little coarse threaded Phillips heads. Well, actually not a Phillips head, that's a 2mm size screw that we're going to put back in. So what I'm going to do now that we got it all plugged in, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the wheel. Remember, I'm going to be using the Porsche wheel, one of my favorite Fanatec wheels actually, and the endurance button module. So I'm going to get everything put back together, and when we come back, we'll take a look at how all that turned out. Okay guys, we're back, and the wheel is all back together now on our podium hub, our endurance module, and our Porsche wheel. Now, that's what the shifters sound like. Versus, this is the, we'll go ahead and use this as an example. Advanced paddle module. Wow, not much noise there, is there? Not much sound at all. Not only that, but because it has that rubbery bump to it, it doesn't have the same tactile feel. Now, whether you like this type or you like what's going on over here is totally subjective, right? But I like this. Yeah. It's loud, obviously it's a lot louder, but there's also a crisper feel to the shifter when I pull it, right? So yeah, this is definitely dampened, but it's very quiet. So again, you may need this depending on where you're driving or doing your racing, but I don't have to worry about that here at the SRG. So yeah, this is fine. And I definitely prefer the feel of that. And it's right where I need it to be as far as the reach for my hand. I got a small hand, so yeah, my finger's falling right on the paddle where it needs to. And yeah, I think this is going to be great. So the spacers and all the way out to the last set of holes was the setting was the sweet spot for me. So great, we got it all put together now. All we have to do is go put it on the podium wheelbase that I have and give it a run and see what we think about these shifters. So here is the wheel mounted to the DD1 wheelbase. And once I did that and cinched everything up tight as far as the connection is concerned, it did feel a little bit different in hand than it did over there on the bench, which is not surprising because everything is tight now and in the driving condition, if you will. And I will show you guys this. There is a little bit of, oh, well, this is going to show up, a little deflection or flex here. I can actually pull this a little bit. You can see that. Now, when you're driving, you're not going to notice that because all I'm doing is this, right? I'm not pulling hard on the shifter. I'm just kind of snapping it, snap, snap. So I'm not going to feel that. But the reason it's doing that, or one of the reasons, is because this plate here is putting a lot of leverage on the actual shift lever right here, because that's where we're connected at. And I'm all the way out here on the end holes. So I could go in one actually, because I've been driving a little bit, and I might do that eventually, just move the paddle in one set of holes. And of course, that's going to take away some of the flex. But again, under driving conditions, you do not feel that. Of course, there's the other one over there again on the last set of holes. And yeah, so we are ready to go driving now. So we'll get in and do some driving, and yeah, I'll talk about what I think. So here we are in iRacing. It's Sebring and the Ferrari 488 GT3. Now, first thing we'll talk about is dependability of these shifters as far as making shifts and not missing any. I'm happy to report I didn't miss any shifts, at least not because of the shifter's fault. And also, I couldn't detect any latency as far as when I pulled the shifter and when my brain thought the shift should be happening. It was always on time every time. So I really have nothing to complain about there. They're performing their job quite well. And yeah, I didn't really expect any problems here, but you never know, what you get out of the box until you're testing it. So everything is good as far as that goes. And as we discussed before, I am running these shifters without the rubber damper elements inside the shifter lever, which gives it a much crisper feel when you're actually shifting, but it also makes it louder. And of course, the loudness does not bother me when I'm racing in the SRG. I don't have to worry about disturbing anyone. So, there's always a compromise, and I don't have to worry about that. So I love the crispy feel of the shifter now, and the ticking or clicking of the shifter is just a reassuring sound to me that the shift was made, even though you really don't need that sound. It just kind of blends in, if you will, to the whole experience when you're using a wheel with paddle shifters and magnetic paddle shifters. Now, obviously, these feel much better to me than the spring shifters we find in the Elite and even the Clubsport wheels in their stock condition. So yeah, if I have some Fanatec wheels with those spring shifters, and these are $100, it's, to me, at the end of the day, it's worth it. Might not be worth it to everyone, but it really gives you a nice crisp click. And again, it's going to be louder, but again, it's not anything that's going to affect me here at the SRG. So you have to consider that. Now, the tactile feedback obviously goes up a lot here without that rubber piece in there. And I still have the rubber piece in the F1 2020 wheel, and obviously my APM modules. And yeah, right away, it's a more pleasant experience for me personally, and again, being subjective, that I like that feel. I like that tactile feedback when I make that shift. It's just a reassuring feeling when I'm in the car and driving. So, and again, that depends on who you are and where you are, or as whether or not you can do that. Now, I would not recommend you take these rubbers out, all right? Because you need a specific tool to do this correctly. And if you don't have that tool, you're going to end up scraping things up and bending things, and you'll never get that clip back on the way it came off. And if you don't, then that means the shaft is not going to be secured, that rod in there that everything's pivoting on, and it's going to drop out, or it's going to be shaking loose, and that's just a bad situation. So unless you have the right tools, I would not attempt to remove it the way I did. Now, if you're dead set on removing the rubbers, you could always just cut one end of that little barbell shape that it has, and it'll slide right out, but you're not going to be able to put it back in case you don't like it. So that's why I did it the way I did it. Now, overall, again, nothing to complain about these shifters. At $100, yeah, I would recommend them if you want a magnetic shifter. It reminds me of the F1 wheel I had before that I actually got some aftermarket magnetic shifters and put on it, and I loved them. And it was just so much of improvement over that spring shifter that Fanatec has in their OEM wheels. So yes, it's kind of like, to me, it's a no-brainer, $100, even though it is $100. I wish it was less, but you do get, I think, what you're paying for here at that price point with these shifters, because they seem to be something that's going to last a long time. And you can configure them. You can make them quiet, or you can make them loud, so they're a little bit adjustable. Now, as far as being adjustable on the reach, I didn't have any problem where I have adjusted where you can see here. Tempted to put them in one more set of holes just in case, but again, I'll probably just leave them where they are unless I don't have anything else to do, because they feel great where they are, and it'd just be tweaking something for the sake of tweaking at that point. Right, so yeah, I guess that's about it as far as how these shifters are performing, and yeah, we'll just get on to the final thoughts after this. Final thoughts on the Clubsport magnetic paddle module from the guys at Fanatec. I first got my hands on these during the review of the F1 2020 limited edition wheel. I thought they were the best shifters I had ever felt from Fanatec and was hoping that they would be released as a standalone accessory. The shifters have the usual top-shelf finish I have come to expect from Fanatec's Clubsport level products. Solid feeling aluminum housings and shift levers. The levers do come with a rubber sound damper installed to keep you from disturbing others during your driving sessions. They also have a damping effect on the shifter's feel when in use. I personally prefer a more crispy feeling shifter, so I did remove the rubber pieces in pursuit of this feel. It's not a simple task, and I would advise against it unless you have the proper tools to remove the small retaining clips to get the shift lever out of the housing. This way you can reinstall the rubber piece if you decide you don't like the snappier feel. Of course, you could just clip off one end of the rubber damper and slide it out, but I'm pretty sure that would void your warranty. Installation of the shifters on my podium hub was easy with no dramas to speak of. Driving with these new magnetic shifters was a pleasure, especially when compared to the spring shifters that Fanatec wheels come with. A very noticeable jump in the tactile feedback when making shifts. I didn't have any dramas using these shifters, never missing a shift. Really, nothing I can find to complain about here. I like these shifters and wonder what took Fanatec so long to get around to making them. At a price of $100 plus shipping, I think you do get your money's worth here. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.